Sinister stories.
In the heart of a quaint suburban neighborhood nestled between towering trees and cozy homes, the Harrow family prepared for an ordinary evening. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the familiar streets. Yet, an ominous unease lingered in the air, unnoticed by most. As dinner simmered on the stove, the first tremor struck. The ground beneath the Harrow's home quivered and groaned, sending shivers through the foundation. Glasses rattled in the cupboards, and the family huddled together, wide-eyed with fear. "What's happening, Mom?" young Bonnie whimpered, clutching her mother's hand tightly. "I don't know, sweetie," Mrs. Harrow replied, her voice trembling. "Just stay close." But the tremors only intensified, each one more violent than the last. Books tumbled from shelves, pictures crashed to the floor, and the family's sense of security shattered with each jolt. Panic gripped their hearts as they realized they were at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Amidst the chaos, Mr. Harrow managed to reach for a portable radio. Static crackled through the airwaves, interrupted by urgent warnings from officials about the escalating seismic activity. The ground shook relentlessly, as if the earth itself were protesting some unseen injustice. Then, as suddenly as it began, the tremors ceased. Silence descended upon the neighborhood, broken only by the sound of distant sirens wailing in the night. "It's over, right?" Bonnie asked, her voice quivering with uncertainty. "I don't know, honey," Mrs. Harrow murmured, her eyes scanning the darkened streets outside. "But we need to be prepared for anything." Little did they know, their ordeal had only just begun. As the night wore on, whispers of fear spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Reports trickled in of widespread power outages, collapsed stores, and roads rendered impassable by rubble. The Harrows huddled together in the dim glow of candlelight, clinging to each other for comfort as they awaited the dawn. But when morning finally came, it brought with it an eerie sight that sent chills down their spines. A dark shadow crept across the sky, blotting out the sun in a sinister embrace. A solar eclipse, unexpected and ominous, casting the world below into a twilight realm of uncertainty. With the power still out and communication lines down, the Harrows were left to navigate this new reality alone. Supplies dwindled with each passing day, and tensions ran high as the family struggled to cope with the fear and uncertainty that gripped them like a vice. Day after day, and still, the eclipse lingered, its oppressive presence weighing heavily on the land. With each passing day, the darkness seemed to grow deeper, seeping into the very fabric of their existence. But amidst the despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. Mr. Harrow, determined to protect his family at any cost, ventured out into the desolate streets in search of supplies. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and sheer determination, he braved the unknown, driven by love and a fierce desire to keep his family safe. Yet, as the days stretched into weeks, hope began to fade, replaced by a gnawing sense of desperation. The world outside grew increasingly hostile, teeming with unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. And then, one fateful night, as the family huddled together in their darkened home, a sound echoed through the stillness that chilled them to the bone. A low, guttural rumble, like the growl of some ancient beast awakened from its slumber. The ground beneath them shuddered and groaned once more powerful than any tremor they had felt before. The walls of their home creaked and groaned under the strain, threatening to collapse at any moment. With a collective cry of terror, the family clung to each other, their hearts pounding in their chests as the world outside descended into chaos once more. And then, as suddenly as it began, the shaking ceased. The eerie silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing and the faint echo of distant sirens wailing in the night. As dawn broke on the horizon, the family emerged from the ruins of their home, their faces drawn and pale with exhaustion. The world outside lay in ruins, a shadow of its former self, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. But amidst the devastation, a flicker of light pierced the darkness. In the distance, a faint glimmer of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the ravaged landscape. And as the Harrow family stood together, battered but unbroken, they knew that no matter what trials lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by love and a strength forged in the fires of adversity. For in the darkest of times, hope endures, a beacon of light guiding the way through the shadows of despair. And though the road ahead may be long and fraught with peril, the Harrow family knew that as long as they had each other, they would never truly be alone. As the sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds, the Harrow family surveyed the wreckage of their once peaceful neighborhood. Buildings lay in ruins, streets cracked and impassable, and the air hung heavy with the scent of smoke and despair. But amidst the devastation, a sense of grim determination burned within them, a resolve to rebuild and survive against all odds. As they began to sift through the debris of their home, salvaging what little they could, a knock sounded at the door. Startled, they exchanged wary glances before Mrs. Harrow cautiously approached the entrance. Opening the door, she found herself face to face with a family she had never seen before. A man, woman, and 2 children stood on the doorstep, their expressions grave yet strangely familiar. "We're your neighbors," the man said, his voice tight with tension. "We heard what happened and wanted to see if you were okay." Mrs. Harrow hesitated, her instincts on high alert. She had lived in this neighborhood for years and knew all of her neighbors by name. Yet, these people seemed like strangers, their presence unsettling in the aftermath of the disaster. "We're fine, thank you," she replied cautiously. "But we have a lot of work to do. I'm sorry, but now isn't really a good time." But the man persisted, his smile strained and insincere. "Nonsense, we're here to help. We'll pitch in and get things back to normal in no time." Reluctantly, Mrs. Harrow stepped aside, allowing the strangers to enter their home. As they began to work alongside the Harrow family, their helpful demeanor quickly gave way to something more sinister. The man, whose name they claimed was Mr. Evans, seemed to take charge, barking orders and directing the cleanup effort with an air of authority that bordered on arrogance. His wife, Mrs. Evans, hovered nearby, her eyes darting about as if searching for something hidden beneath the rubble. And then there were the children, a boy and a girl, who watched the Harrow family with cold, calculating eyes. They spoke little, but their presence caused an immense amount of fear of Bonnie and her siblings, a sense of unease that lingered long after they had gone to bed. As the days continued, the Evans family ingratiated themselves further into the lives of the Harrows, their presence becoming increasingly oppressive. They would arrive unannounced, offering to help with chores or bring food, their smiles growing more forced with each passing day. But beneath their facade of kindness lurked something darker, a hidden agenda. Whispers began to circulate among the neighbors, tales of strange occurrences and missing persons, all seemingly connected to the Evans family. Yet, try as they might, the Harrows could find no evidence to support their suspicions. The Evans family was always one step ahead, their alibis airtight and their demeanor unwavering in the face of scrutiny. And then, one fateful night, as a storm raged outside and the darkness pressed in around them, the truth was finally revealed. Awakened by a strange noise, Mr. Harrow crept downstairs to investigate, his heart pounding in his chest. As he reached the bottom step, he froze, his blood turning to ice at the sight before him. The Evans family stood in the living room, their faces twisted with malice as they loomed over the sleeping forms of the Harrow family. In their hands, they held knives gleaming in the dim light, their intentions clear. With a cry of alarm, Mr. Harrow lunged forward, his instincts kicking into overdrive as he fought to protect his family from the impending threat. But the Evans family was prepared, their movements swift and coordinated as they overpowered him with ease. As Mrs. Harrow and the children awoke to the sound of the struggle, panic set in, their screams echoing through the night as they realized the true nature of their supposed neighbors. With nowhere to run and no one to turn to, they fought desperately for their lives, their fear driving them to the brink of madness. But just as all hope seemed lost, a glimmer of light pierced the darkness, illuminating the room in a warm golden glow. The eclipse that had plagued their world for so long had finally come to an end, casting aside the shadows that had threatened to consume them. In the newfound light, the Harrow family found strength, rallying together to fend off their attackers with a courage born of desperation. With a final, desperate push, they managed to overpower the Evans family, sending them fleeing into the night with their tails between their legs. As dawn broke on the horizon, the Harrow family emerged from the ordeal battered but alive, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had survived against all odds. And though the scars of their ordeal would linger for years to come, they knew that as long as they had each other, they could face whatever challenges the future held. But as they watched the sun rise on a new day, a nagging sense of unease lingered in the back of their minds, a reminder of the darkness that still lurked just beyond the horizon. For though they had escaped the clutches of the Evans family, they knew that the true horrors of the world lay not in the shadows themselves, but in the hearts of those who dwelled within them. With that sobering thought, the Harrow family turned their gaze to the uncertain future that lay ahead, knowing that while the road ahead would be fraught with peril, they would face it together, bound by love and a shared determination to survive at any cost. And as they stepped out into the dawning light, they knew that whatever trials awaited them, they would face them head-on, armed with nothing but the strength of their convictions and the unbreakable bond that held them together. As the days passed, and the memory of their harrowing encounter with the Evans family faded into the recesses of their minds, the Harrow family focused on rebuilding their shattered lives. With each sunrise, they emerged from the safety of their home, venturing out into the desolate streets in search of supplies and solace in the wake of the disaster that had befallen their once peaceful neighborhood. But as they struggled to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, a new threat emerged, one far more insidious than any they had faced before. It began with subtle signs, a missing can of food here, a misplaced tool there, but as the days turned into weeks, the thefts grew bolder and more brazen. Supplies vanished without a trace, their carefully hoarded provisions dwindling with each passing day. At first, the Harrow family dismissed the disappearances as the work of scavengers or animals seeking refuge in the aftermath of the disaster. But as the thefts continued unabated, they began to suspect that something more sinister was at play. Their suspicions were confirmed one fateful night when Mr. Harrow caught sight of their neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, skulking around the perimeter of their property. His face contorted with rage, Mr. Jenkins fled into the darkness, leaving Mr. Harrow to ponder the implications of his discovery. Determined to confront their neighbor and put an end to the thefts once and for all, Mr. Harrow set out to find Mr. Jenkins and demand an explanation for his actions. But as he ventured deeper into the night, he realized that the darkness held secrets far more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. As he rounded a corner, Mr. Harrow stumbled upon a makeshift camp, hidden amidst the ruins of a nearby building. There, surrounded by stolen supplies and makeshift weapons, he found Mr. Jenkins and a group of like-minded individuals, their faces twisted with greed and desperation. Caught off guard, Mr. Harrow found himself outnumbered and outmatched, his pleas for reason falling on deaf ears as the group closed in around him. With no other choice, he fought back with all the strength and determination he could muster, his heart pounding in his chest as he struggled to hold his own against the tide of aggression that threatened to overwhelm him. But just as all hope seemed lost, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows, her face illuminated by the faint glow of a lantern. It was Mrs. Harrow, her eyes blazing with fury as she confronted their assailants with a courage born of desperation. With a cry of defiance, she rallied to her husband's side, her determination unwavering in the face of overwhelming odds. Together, they fought tooth and nail against their attackers, their spirits unbroken despite the overwhelming odds stacked against them. And then, just when it seemed that all was lost, a piercing light cut through the darkness, illuminating the night with a brilliant glow, casting aside the shadows that had threatened to consume them and revealing the true extent of their strength and resilience. In the newfound light, the Harrow family stood victorious, their attackers vanquished and their spirits emboldened by the knowledge that they had survived against all odds. With a sense of determination born of adversity, they returned home, their hearts full of hope for the future and the challenges that lay ahead. As dawn broke on the horizon, the Harrow family emerged from the darkness, battered but unbroken, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that no matter what trials awaited them, they would face them together, bound by love and a shared determination to survive at any cost. For in the darkest of times, hope endures, a beacon of light guiding the way through the shadows of despair.